Hi, friends. I hope you're having a great day today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us in today's story. This story is going to be about my journey on how I became a shaman. I saw some things here and there and got sleep paralysis a few times throughout my life. I then got some really bad hives from an unknown allergic reaction and exhausted all my options. I waited until the verge of death before seeking out spiritual help. I'm one of the biggest skeptics out there, especially when it comes to spiritual things that involves shaman. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there can relate. Women typically seek out spiritual help before males. When I finally spoke with the shaman, she told me that I had guides or konings. And here's how my story began. My first incident of ever seeing anything paranormal started when I was 5 years old. It was 1996 and we were still living in Visalia, California. Visalia was a small farm-like town. We were living in a 2-bedroom apartment filled with 11 kids and 2 adults. I still have flashbacks of all the kids in the neighborhood stacking up their baseball cards and throwing sandals at the cards. Whatever cards you hit with your sandal from the stack of baseball cards, you would get to keep. We would always walk to the local convenience store nearby to put quarters into the baseball card vending machine. 2 quarters in, and you get a folded white cardboard covering that had 5 baseball cards inside. One day, I was sitting in the middle seat of our van staring out the window. We drove past the local convenience store as I was staring into the concrete brick wall which was on the side of the store. I then noticed a little girl standing in front of the bus stop. She was dressed in black and red Hmong clothes. She had long black hair that covered her face. As my parents drove past, I stared at the girl and wondered to myself how strange that was. To be out in public like that in broad daylight wearing Hmong clothes? That wasn't normal. But looking back today, I know that it was a ponzong. The next incident occurred a few years later. It was 2005 and we just moved into Fresno. I was now a new freshman in high school. The house that we were currently living in had 6 bedrooms and had previously been a duplex that was converted over to a house. My room was located in the most isolated back end of the house. I would always hear tapping against the glass windows. It was as if someone's fingernails were tapping against my window. Each time it happened late at night, I would sit there laying on my bed as I turned my head to the side and buried it beneath my pillows. The tappings would start quietly, then the noise would grow louder and louder. I would throw the blanket off and roll off to the side of my bed as I rushed towards my door and flipped on the light switch. The room lit up and I slowly creeped towards my windows as I pulled the window blinds up. There was nothing outside besides the darkness of the night. The next morning, I walked outside my bedroom window searching for some logical explanation, but found nothing. There were no trees or bushes next to my window, just a concrete sidewalk. The next night, the same thing happened again. This time, I looked at my alarm clock and saw that it was 3:09 in the morning. During this time, my parents and everyone else had been out of town. The only one left home was me and my older brother. I grabbed a blanket and ran out of my room. I started running in the opposite direction of the house and quickly jumped into my little brother's room. As soon as I got in there, I jumped on top of his bunk bed. A few minutes passed, then the tapping started continuing again. This time, it was in my little brother's room, on the other side of the house. My heart sank and my body began to heat up. I could feel sweat starting to build as goosebumps began to take over my body. After a while, I got fed up with this BS, so I decided to open the blinds again. As I pulled open the blinds, the tapping stopped. I pulled down the blinds again, and the tapping continues. At this point, I was scared and couldn't figure out why this noise kept occurring. I then decided to switch room to my oldest brother's room, which was located in the middle of the house. I kept whispering to myself, "It must be in my head," while I walked towards my brother's room. I got up and started knocking on his door. He woke up and opened his doors while still rubbing his eyes. He looks at me and says, "What do you want? Don't you know it's 3:30 in the morning? You should be sleeping." I whisper, "I don't know if I'm tripping out or what, but I swear I keep hearing someone tap on my window. I switched room and everything, but it's still the same. Do you think I could crash in your room for the night?" My brother grunts and mumbles, "Fine," but only for the night. I rushed into his bed and jumped by the corner of his bed. I threw my blanket over my head as I turned my body towards the wall. Next to his wall was where his windows was located. My eyes began heavy and my body began to sink into the fluffy bed as I began to drift off into the quietness of the night. Then the thumping started again. The neighbor's dog started barking this time, and the barking became louder and louder as the tapping grew. I whispered to my brother, "Dude, do you hear the tapping on the window?" He responded, "You're just probably hearing stuff, and there's nothing to be scared of." I waited another 5 minutes, then the tappings still continued on his window. I tapped my brother on the shoulder again and said, "Dude, do you hear that? There's someone tapping on your window." He got up and looked at me and says, "Go to sleep, dude. There's nothing." I stood up, then rushed towards his window blinds and opened it. There we both stood, standing up, staring out into the window. There was nothing to be seen outside, except the neighbor's little chihuahua barking and staring at us from the chain link fence. I closed the blinds and shut my eyes as I blocked out the noise and drifted off into sleep. The tappings continued throughout the years, but I haven't experienced sleep paralysis before. The first time experiencing sleep paralysis was in December of 2010. I ended up marrying my wife that I dated since high school. We were high school sweethearts and started dating when I was about 13. When I had my son at the age of 19, the sleep paralysis started happening. At night, I would hear the window tappings all night, then in the daytime, I would get sleep paralysis around noon. I would get really sleepy and end up taking a nap, and every time I would take that nap, I would feel a heavy, dark shadow creep into the room and sit on top of me. This would happen each and every time when I was half awake and half asleep. I struggled and tried to move, but it was useless. I would get so frustrated that I would always swing my fist in mid-air to try to hit that person. Fast forward to May of 2015. I turned 24 and the weirdest incident happened. I've never been allergic to anything in my whole entire life. I was at work and my manager came by and looked at me, then asked, "Hey, are you okay? You're really red." I stared at her with confusion and responded, "What are you talking about?" She then answered, "Go take a look in the mirror." I walked back into the break room and took a look into the mirror. There I stood staring at the mirror and noticed that there was red patches all over my face. My ribs started to get very itchy, so I lifted my shirt and I had more red patches all over my body. I ended up leaving home early from work. When I got home, my heart became very heavy and I had a hard time breathing. My breath got shorter and shorter. I then looked at my wife and said, "Hey honey, I think it's time to go to the emergency room." My wife responded, "Yeah, let's go." We rushed out to the hospital nearby. A few hours went by and the doctor approaches me. He walks into the room and pulls over a chair and takes a seat. He stated, "I have a few questions for you. Have you eaten or tried anything new? Have you ever been allergic to anything in your life before?" I responded, "I've never been allergic to anything in my whole life. Also, I haven't eaten anything new. I just went to work, came back home early and looking like this." He then responded, "Okay, do not worry. You could be allergic to anything. It could be the air quality, pollen, food, etc. You'll need to see a specialist. This allergic reaction continued for 30 days. consecutively. As soon as the sun dropped, my hives would worsen. I ended up going to the emergency room a total of 2 times within those 30 days. My hives have gotten so bad that I was prescribed 2 EpiPens just in case. I took Benadryl every 3 hours and Allegra every 10 hours for the next 30 days. Allegra was supposed to be effective for 12 hours, but as soon as the 9th and 10th hour hit, my hives would flare back up. At this point in my life, I ran out of scientific explanations. The doctors wanted me to prick my skin with a million different things to see what my skin would react to. These daunting tasks would take months and years to figure out. Then my wife made a suggestion that I talk to one of her shaman friends. She mentioned that the shaman friend could take a look at my issue if I was open up to it. I told my wife, why not? I've tried everything up to this point that I could think of, and right now I'm willing to try anything. My wife scheduled the appointment with the shaman. During this time, we were still living in the apartment with my brothers. One day, my dad happened to be staying with us, and no one was home except for the both of us. My dad sat me down and looked me in the eyes and said, "Hey son, I heard from one of your brothers that you're planning on moving in with your father-in-law. Are you sure you want to move in with him?" I responded to my dad and said, "Dad, I'm gonna go try it out and I'll let you know what happens." After that conversation, we never spoke about the subject again. My wife set up the phone call with the shaman lady. My wife explained the situation to the shaman and asked her if she can help us look into the issue. The shaman started chanting what sounded like a mixture of Chinese and Hmong mix. Then she said, "Hey, it seems like there's something attached to your husband. Would you like for me to remove it?" We both answer, "Of course. Please do what you can to remove the entity." She then restarts her chanting and said, "If your symptoms stop within the next few days, please prepare some paper money boats. The boats will be used as a bribery for the attachment to leave." Then she says, "Hey, there's also another issue. It seems like you have guides or koning." My wife and I looked at each other and said, "What the hell is that?" We're sure we both don't have koning or guides or whatever you're talking about. The shaman stops for a minute and starts talking in a foreign language and states, "You both have koning or guides, and your husband had a talk with his father recently." I stared at my wife in disbelief and was thinking, what the hell? Did my wife tell the shaman about me and my dad's conversation? Then I recalled thinking to myself, wait a minute, I never told her about that conversation. The shaman then continues and says, "It seems like you're going to move in with your father-in-law. Is that correct?" I answered, "Yes, my wife and I are contemplating about it." Then the shaman says, "It seems like you told your dad that you're going to go try it out." As soon as I heard this phrase, my heart sank. I knew exactly what she was talking about because that was the same exact words that I said to my dad. All that was going on in my head was like, what the hell is going on here? First of all, no one knows about this conversation, so how was she able to bring it up? Then the shaman stated, "Are you going to take on your guides or Kuan because they're asking?" I looked at my wife and stated, "Yes, I'll take them on only if they're real, but as of right now, it's not the right time." The shaman then states, "Okay, that's fine. Then did you want me to delay them?" "It'll be a temporary fix, and they'll eventually come back and find you when the timing is right." I responded, "Yes, please delay them for now, as my life isn't in order yet." The shaman then started chanting again, and it sounded as if she was conversing with another spirit. Then she responded, "I can delay it for 5 years. After the timing is up, your symptoms may start back up, or you may start experiencing more paranormal things." My wife and I both thank her and continue onwards with our life. The following day, I woke up with all my hives gone. Just like that, it disappeared without a trace. At this point in my life, I was shocked and amazed at how quickly it cleared. After the third day, We prepare all the necessary items and call the shaman back to finish up the ceremony. Fast forward to 2016, we ended up moving from Fresno to Sacramento. During this phase in our life, we ended up getting involved with a local church in Sacramento. I told my older sister that I wanted to get back to the community, and I was looking for an opportunity to do some community service. My sister invited me out to this local church that they attended. She mentioned that my brother-in-law's cousin needed some help setting up, that they would appreciate it if I could swing by. During this time, I was working overnight, and I would come help the local church set up right after work. I would get off around 4 to 5 in the morning and would come to set up right afterwards. I would set up until 7 or 8 a.m., then go home to get some rest. On other days, I felt like I had more energy. I would stay until 11 or noon. The church was really warm and welcoming. It was like no other church that I've been to before. They spoke about real-life topics that were relevant, and each message seemed to fit the situation in your current life. My wife wanted us to convert over to Christians, but I refused. What was still stuck in my head was what the shaman said. I still couldn't wrap my head around what she said to me and how she knew what she knew. I volunteered and been so consistent with setting up the church that one of the leaders sat me down. This leader is Hmong too, and he said, "Hey, how do you feel about leading set up in church?" I responded, "I can't. I love the church and everything that you guys are doing here, but I can't get over what the shaman said to me." Everything that she stated came out to be true. I told him a recap of what had happened 5 years previously, and he looks at me and says, "You truly believe that?" I responded, "Yeah. Like, how is someone going to bring up a conversation that you never told anyone else about?" For this sole reason is the reason why I never converted. If it wasn't for these things that held me back, I would have been a Christian for sure. Christians have a strong sense of community that keeps people from falling out. The community in the Hmong culture is only as strong as those who has a lot of relatives and siblings. Throughout the years, we stayed in close contact and became good friends with the shaman. Every time she came into town, we would stop by and visit. She eventually became my master when I rose as a shaman. I've met many shamans and attended many jingle bell sessions, but I've never once showed any shaman symptoms while attending the events. In 2021, my dad had a lot of medical issues. He was in critical condition at the hospital, so my wife and I decided to reach back out to the shaman to ensure that everything was good on the spiritual side. My wife called the shaman and asked her to check if my dad's spirit was good. The shaman started chanting and then asked us, "Did your dad have a recent dream of a white lady trying to take him?" Before me and my wife even had the chance to ask my mom, she blurted, "Yes, before your dad went to the hospital, he told me that he dreamed of a white girl trying to hold his hand." Me and my wife looked at each other in disbelief. The shaman stated, "Oh, okay. Let me remove this lady to ensure that your dad's surgery will go smoothly. If we don't remove this entity, then your dad might not make it because his soul is very sad and weak. He keeps reminiscing about the old country a lot." We told the shaman to proceed with whatever is required, and we set a jingle bell session if my dad was to have a full recovery. My mom is sitting there in disbelief and decided to reach out to 4 other shamans. No one was able to see what this shaman mentioned. After the surgery, my father recovered, and I sat him down at the hospital and said, "Hey Dad, we had a shaman look into you. She said you were reminiscing about Laos or Nishisheng, and that you dreamed of a white girl trying to take you." My dad's face turned pale, and tears started rushing down his eyes. My dad wouldn't say one word to me. Up to this point in my life, I have never seen my dad cry before. By him crying, it meant that everything that was said by the shaman was true, and he acknowledged it. 5 months went by. We were in June of 2021. We flew the shaman over to complete the ceremony. After the ceremony was completed, some of the shaman's friends attended the ceremony. We all got accustomed to each other, and they mentioned that they were putting up their altars next month and for us to attend if we could. We ended up going to the ceremony, and the weirdest thing happened. The shaman looked at me and said, "Hey, you still don't believe me that you have guides or Kuning, right?" I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "No, I don't." She then states, "You should try the bench today then." I looked at the shaman and thought to myself, "Man, I bet I can shake those bells by myself. I'll try that damn bench." After the ceremony was completed, the shaman looked at me and said, "Okay, it's your turn." I looked at her and responded, "Sure." I approached the bench slowly as I put on the veils and bells. As soon as they started hitting the gong, I felt that my head started spinning around in circles, as if someone was holding my head. The bells started moving by themselves, as if these tiny little fingers were moving the bells. The bells tightened as if it wrapped around my fingers, like a snake. I had no control whatsoever about the movements that were occurring. I also felt a strong yanking, and it felt as if I flew. When my guides pulled me off the bench, I heard a faint voice in my head telling me to jump backwards onto the bench. I told myself, "Oh hell no, I'm not jumping on the bench unless you carry my ass up there." I fought back and forth, trying not to jump backwards on the bench. This went on for about 10 minutes. As the gong started to stop, so did the shaking of the bells. When the shaking stopped, I removed the veil and stared at the shaman in disbelief. She then looks at me and starts laughing. "Now do you believe me?" I stood there shocked, trying to intake everything that has happened. I told my parents that I've decided to take on my journey as a shaman. My dad was supportive, but my mom became hesitant. My dad said that he would support me in whatever I chose to do, while my mom wanted to get more confirmation from multiple shamans. She told me, "You never had any symptoms as a shaman, so there's no way that you'll be a shaman. Don't you know people can trick you by making you shake?" I responded, "You know what? I've decided to go down this route, whether I have your support or not." I went ahead and proceeded with the ceremony of putting up my altar as planned. As time went by, my parents started to acknowledge my guides and started to believe me. There's even times when my guides surprised me as well. As each session passed, things got more and more crazily accurate. I'm a man of my words, and if I made a promise 5 years ago to my guides, then I plan on carrying it out. This is my journey as a rising shaman, and this is the end of the story. I hope that this helps someone who may be experiencing similar things. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share so that other viewers can find this channel. And if anyone has any true stories that they would like to submit, please send us a message. Our email is in the bio, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.